Everyone, in this tutorial we'll learn about Flutter Get API, how to build an API class or call or function for Flutter to be able to receive data from the server. So that would be our main focus. Anyway, so if you download the code from the GitHub link below, and if you start it, you'll see a UI like this, a beautiful UI. And this is coming from homepage, where we have this main app or main function, and my app, then all books. Okay, so now let's take a look at this function, this file, Dart file. Well, now it's pretty much the UI, everything is there. So I'm not going to cover the UI in this case. We'll focus on API call, how to build API call, how they work, and how to manage and how to deal with the JSON data. Now over here, this is the image that I downloaded from network, or it's a network image using network class. So this is the hard coded. Later on we'll see how to receive data from our API call and use it or change the data dynamically, and as well as these options over here, they're all hard coded, as you can see. Nothing to show. So anyway, we'll not cover this UI over here. We'll cover the basic API functionalities of Flutter Flutter app. Okay, so the first thing first, that we want to receive data and we want to build an API class for this. Okay, and now the first thing over here, we'll create a function, a private function, and we'll call it get articles. Okay, now we'll define the function over here, get articles. Okay, now this function should get data, okay, from the server. Then how to get that? Well, now first we should have a class where this function is being called. Okay, so we'll have a different Dart file for this, which is called myapi.dart in this one. And over here I already wrote a function which is called get public data. Well, in our case we can use this, or we'll call it get article data, like that. It doesn't matter what you call it. So we want to be able to call this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. So first we'll call API. So this is the class over here, this class call API, and this has a function called get article data. So let's go ahead and call it get article data. All right, now it takes an endpoint or a router. So we'll call it get recent. This is the router. Okay, and then the server responds back as something, and we'll put this in a variable called response. You can call it whatever you want, and then you want to go through it later on. Okay, let's see, get articles, if we are getting any error. No, yes, I think we had a typo there. Okay, so now what is this article data function, and what is this one? So let's go ahead and take a look. Now this function or method in call API, which is over here. Okay, so what it does is it takes the endpoint. So this is the endpoint, and this endpoint is coming from here. So this is an endpoint in the server, or a route or a path to get data. You can understand it like this. So this is the endpoint we are passing to this method over here, and all it does, it uses this HTTP module to talk with or connect with the server. So this is our base URL. So I'm using Laravel over here. So whatever technology you use in the backend, you should have this base URL. In Laravel, the base URL combines with API. So there's a dedicated module in Laravel, and every endpoint is saved in this API. We'll see it very soon. Anyway, so all it does is it takes the base URL, which is this one, and the endpoint, and combine it together. And because we are using HTTP module, and this is in the Flutter package, so make sure you have this one, or download the package. It should be in your GitHub link, the code which I gave you earlier. Anyway, so check out the link below for the GitHub code. So this complete URL is passed to the server, because we are using HTTP. Well, it does everything under the hood for you, so you don't need to worry about it. So it sends this request with this URL, and now it waits for data. So that's why we have this await, and once you have this await, then you also have to have async this keyword in your method. All right, so it waits for the response, and then we see the response status. If it's 200, it means we are getting correct response from the server. Okay, all right, otherwise we'll see maybe it's wrong. In that case, we'll catch the error, or it can fail for some other reason, so we'll just write here failed. So if we want to know the reason that why it's failing, so you'll try to catch the error and print the error like this. So that's what is getting done over here. Now I'm using what is this, the Postman software, to make sure that our get recent, this endpoint, is working. So once again, this is our endpoint get recent. Okay, so if it's working or not, we can also confirm it using this one, Postman, this software. Create a get method or get call, I would say, and here is our endpoint. So now you send the request and would be waiting for the response, and as you see, the server response, this is the data we get back from the server. Okay, so it means our endpoint is working. Okay, so now let's take a look at this endpoint in the server side. Okay, what it does and how it gets the data. So what it does over here, once again, is Laravel. So as I told you that Laravel has a dedicated file which is called API, which sits in the routes folder, and over here you write all of your routes or the endpoints. So in our case, we are interested about this one, which I already wrote. So this is the get recent. Remember, this one has to be the same exact correct name as this one. In general, they're all small letters, so you don't want to have capital letters there. Okay, now this one has this. So I have this controller over here, and this controller has a method called get recent method, and it could be any method you want. You can write it anything, but anyway, whatever you write it, you should have it in your corresponding controller. Our controller is this one, and this controller sits in HTTP controllers folder. Of course, you have to create your own controller. Check out the link below how to create your own dedicated backend. And I'm pretty much using the same technology which I have used for my previous tutorial, so you should be very familiar with this. Anyway, so this is the get recent method, and it has a model which is called an article. Don't forget to import it, which is this one. And the model has a method which is called get recent. So let's take a look at this one. So this is the method which is called get recent, and it returns first 4 posts from the database table. In our case, the database table is an article. So let's go ahead and take a look at this database table. So this is the database table. It has some fields, okay, as you can see from here, and currently it also has this post over here, Chinese and English together. So I have 3 posts over here. So that's what it returns, but it should return 4, but I have only 3. So if you have 4 or 5, then it will return the first 4. Anyway, so it returns the first 4 posts from the database table, and then we loop through it. Of course, before that we save in a variable called list, and we loop through it, and first we check if we have any unnecessary empty space or not, so we get rid of them. And then we check if we have any HTML entities or unnecessary garbage or code, so we get rid all of them using this regex combination. And then we return the response as a JSON. Now we return this response as a JSON string. Okay, so from here we go back to our server, Flutter side. So this is our Flutter side. So when it returns, it saves every information over here in this variable called response. Now response is being saved over here as JSON string. So now we'll go ahead and deal with this JSON string. So how to do that? Now there are a few ways to deal with the response from the server. The first you could definitely just use the JSON string as it is and use the key pair value, or the second method, you convert the string to Dart map, and you can also use key pair values, or you create your own Dart model and use them. Now with the first one, it just supports certain data types, not all the data types. In database, you can have any kind of data format. So the default one might not support, and once again this is not reusable. So every time you return a JSON response from the server, you have to write it again and again. With the second one, it's a bit annoying, and it could be also that you need to write a lot of code and not reusable. So the third one is a bit of annoying as well, but it's reusable, which means you can change a little bit and reuse it again. So we'll see how to create a Dart model to handle JSON response from the server and use it in Flutter. Okay. All right. So now to do that, we also done the basic coding for this, which is called, so the basic coding of the model I saved in article info. So this one. So over here I created a class which is called article info, and it has some variables, but these variables directly relate to our database fields. Okay. So if you come back to our database, you will see that these are the fields over here. So like ID, article content, IMG, title, like that. Okay. So they have this one-on-one direct connection, and they have to have the same name. Okay. And then this is the default constructor you should have in any kind of class. Now you pass the variable, and it's saved in this variables over here. Okay. Now one thing is that we have another constructor. So this is fromJson. This is another constructor that we are using. Now that's because we are dealing with mapping in our class. So if you don't need to deal with mapping in general, you don't use this constructor. And this mapping also preserves the data type, like say if in our case the ID is int type, so this mapping would reserve this data type. So whatever data type you have your other variables, so they'll reserve it. And once you have this in a mapping format, which is one-on-one connection, it's easy to work with later on. Okay, so that's why we want to use this special constructor which is called fromJson. Okay, so now this is our model. So within the model we have these fields, these variables, and these variables they have to do with directly from the database field. So I hope you understand. If you have questions, you can leave a comment below. Now get back to our file which is called all books over here. So now we have this response saved in our response variable from the server, so we want to use them. Okay, so how do you do that? Now we'll create a iterable list, a variable called list, and then do remember that we need to decode them, because this response directly from the database JSON response. So before you go ahead and use them, you must decode them. So we will use JSON.decode function, and now it will have response.body section. So now this from the server, when it returns object, so JSON object or JSON, it returns JSON, then it also returns the body section. Actually within the body section you will have your data, the data you are looking for. Okay, so make sure that you call .data. Okay, so now it is saved in list. Okay, so now they're all saved in list, but they don't have this model, data model connection, the datas like this one over here. So that's what we want to do. So we want to map them, okay, so that we would be able to use this variables or fields in our code in our file later on in this class. Okay, so now from the list we want to map them. Okay, now we'll pass a variable, we'll call it model. You can call it any variable you want. Okay, and then we'll call this articles dot article info, I guess. Yes, article info. This is our class name over here, this one, article info. And now it is a method, constructor method we learned earlier, which is called fromJson, right? Now we'll pass this variable which is called model over here. Okay, and then we'll convert it to the list, Okay, so now what's happening here? So we have the response from the server, and it's saved in a list variable which is iterable. We can go through it, but it has many different fields for each line or each row, because this is saved in a row. So now we go through each of the row, and this row's name is model, and now we pass it to article info, which is over here. Okay, and then we build this one-on-one data model connection. Okay, and we also preserve the data format. And then because map doesn't return a list, so we convert it to a list again because we want to use them later in our code later on. Okay, now we want to save it somewhere so that we can use it, and we'll save it over here. Okay, so which is called articles. Okay, now of course this will throw an error because we are returning a list over here, but this is not a list type. So we'll create article list over here, article info list. Okay, so this is empty list. Now the error is gone. So now articles, this variable has our information. Okay, and this information are all saved in different variables within it, like this variable, so we can access them later on using these names. Okay, all right, so now we are done with this part. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to display them. Let's take a look at this class or widget called single child scroll view, and within it I have column, and within column we have children, but right now we have only one child, so we see one child. So what do we want to do? We want to show every information we received from the server over here right below one by one. So this is all hard coded now, so we want to be dynamic. So do remember that our variable information are all saved over here within this variable, which is articles, and this is a type of article info, right? Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look over here. So what we could do, first we can collapse this one so that we can get a whole view of this thing. Okay, now we want to return and create dynamically widget. Okay, so that should be coming from articles variable. So the first thing we could do, we can get rid of this braces over here. Now we'll call articles over here. Now articles has information and we want to access them one by one, so that's why we want to use a map function over here, and we will, because this article will have a row of information, so we want to access each of the row in a variable called article. Okay, you can call it any name over here, it doesn't matter though. Okay, and then once you access them, you want to return. Okay, and once you return, you want to turn them into a list. Okay, because map itself is not directly usable within widget, so you want to return it as a list so that you can use it. What would list do would help you to list like this one by one. Okay, so list is also more like a for loop, you can understand. Okay, now we want to move this section up there, and because we are returning something within this second bracket, so we want to use return keyword and put our rest of the code over here, and as we are returning it, we want to close it within this semicolon. Of course we don't need this one over here. Okay, so now this is what is happening here. So column will call this articles and it'll map through it and display all the information one by one. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, it looks like yes, we have a response. But now what happening here? Now we have this hard coded but 3 times. Do remember, because in the database we saw early that we have 3 information in our database, but now these are all hard coded. All we need to do, change them. How do you change them? So first find this image and change it. Okay, so this image section is over here, so we don't want this one anymore. So we want to call article, the variable we declared early in our list over here, this one. Okay, now it has a field called img, so we'll call img. Now let's save it. Yes, so these are the images we are getting from our server. These are saved in public uploads images folder, and which has to do with a soft link from over here, as you can see. Okay, so make sure that you have correct permission as well, like 775, like that. Okay, images are saved here, and these are the images you saw early just now. And we also want to change this information. Now over here, I think this one, the first one, we'll call article dot, I guess, title. Okay, and the next one is this one. Well, for now I'll keep it hard coded, and so we'll call it articles dot, say, what do we call it? Maybe description, let's call it. Now save it. Yes, so that's what we have pretty much right now. Okay, so we have this 3 information saved in our database and they are showing it over here, but of course because we only have 3, it's not scrollable yet. So now let's take a look at our database over here. Now you can increase it, so we can have multiple one. So as you see, we have this 4 columns in our database, okay, or 4 rows actually. So what do, go ahead and run it and we'll see 4 of them. Okay, yes, now you can scroll them actually. So our get request is working perfectly. Anyway, so if you learned something, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Well, the last thing we want to do, create a circular progress bar or the simple progress bar. So how to do that? It's pretty easy. So as we are rendering the column, we can check over here whether this articles the length is equal 0 or not. So what we'll do, we'll check it, articles.length equal 0. If it's 0, then we'll show circular progress bar, the one default circular progress indicator, this one. Otherwise we'll show the column. So this is the code over here. If it's 0, then we'll display this one, because sometimes you need to wait for the network request to complete and display the data. So let's see how it works. So now as you see, there was this little progress indicator. One more time. Yes, so you saw it, right? So thanks for watching.